Welcome to the New Mexico Suncast. I'm Jim Williams, and our special guest today is Senator Crystal Brantley. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to join you, Jim.
We're going to get right into, I guess I should mention, just for perspective, not everybody knows where you're from. You represent District 35 for the state of New Mexico. And already today, in preparation for this little interview, I've been able to see some of the things that you were doing. And it all revolves around an interesting topic that I don't think many people that don't live in rural areas know about, and that's the Mexican wolf. I was teasing you earlier because Mexican wolf is also known as a lobo. You, of course, as an Aggie,
right?
But we say that in fun, but this has actually become quite a serious problem. So before we talk about the conflicts, Senator, what is the Mexican Wolf Program? Tell us what that is, because I don't think most of us know.
I will. So my Senate district encompasses a lot of rural New Mexico, 7 counties in the southwest corner of New Mexico, including the parts of New Mexico that are Mexican gray wolf country. And in fact, there in Sierra County, up in Catron County, is where I raised my young daughters on the family ranch among wolves, and saw firsthand the challenges of not just raising cattle among a protected and endangered species, but raising children, which is, of course, you know, the personal safety of your children is a priority above cattle any day. And so there are great challenges. So the program was introduced to New Mexico and Arizona in about 1998. And from the very beginning, it was very controversial, as you may imagine, because we are putting wolves back on the landscape that is, quite populated at this time. We have a number of farms and ranching communities, small villages in town, and not to mention the outdoor enthusiasts that frequent the Gila National Forest. So we have a number of hunters, hikers and bikers and walkers, and to introduce an apex predator in the middle of that population is going to have controversy from the very beginning. So on one side, we had our radical kind of extreme environmentalists that wolves belong. And then on the other side, we had to figure out how we were going to manage and raise cattle and raise families and still run businesses with this apex predator that was protected under the Endangered Species Act.
Well, I didn't expect to do this in this interview, but you've just gotten out of a meeting with the governor of the state of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham. Tell us a little bit about that and what that discussion was
It's
about.
been a big week up here in New Mexico, and so I really do appreciate the governor taking time to sit down with me and with representatives from Catron County, because the number one issue in Catron County specifically is the Mexican gray wolf. To summarize a little bit, 85% of the Mexican gray wolves in New Mexico are in just Catron County alone. And so this is something that they live daily. They're seeing an increase in depredations. It's coming at a huge economic loss.
And you're talking about ranchers and farmers.
To ranchers, which is, let me tell you, tourism being the hunting industry is number one in Catron County, followed behind ranching. Well, the introduction of the Mexican gray wolf is taking an absolute toll on both, because they eat, and they eat a lot. And so it's either elk or it's either livestock.
Well, there's tools that have been, put out there for this program. Non-lethal ways to control wolves. And then there's also been a compensation program to reimburse ranchers and farmers for the loss of livestock. How are those two things working out? Are they working out as planned?
I think our ranchers would tell you it hasn't worked out well. And so there are non-lethal ways of discouraging these wolves from coming onto properties. I think many of the complaints that we have from those who are living on the landscape is that the response time is very slow. And the reality is it's very difficult to get confirmed kills from wolves, because the carcasses of these cattle that remain are often then coyotes may appear, or bears may appear, or the fact is you never find the carcass at all. And so
you're talking about wide open spaces too. How big are some of these ranches?
Oh, they're massive. I mean, we have millions of acres within the Gila National Forest, and we have pockets of both BLM, Forest Service, private property, and state lands. And so and these wolves don't know the difference between those land management statuses at all.
Would you mind being a little more specific what a rancher has to go through? What's the actual process? If they feel like one of their animals has been killed, What's the process they have to go through? They have to provide photographic evidence?
It is. It's pretty cumbersome. The challenge there is not only just providing the evidence, but by the time that they have an investigator that shows up, first of all, you have to find the carcass. Okay, so what happens is that you have a number of cattle that are turned out, and then there's just losses that you never see from because the carcasses are never found. On the few exceptions in which you do come across a carcass, it's so difficult to get a confirmed kill. And why is it important to get that confirmed? Is because if there is a payment system in place to pay for those losses, and there has been at both the federal level and now at the state level, there's just been challenges into getting that confirmation, and so it continues to come at a huge economic financial loss.
What kinds of things did you discuss today with the governor about this? Did you go over some of these points?
We did, and I appreciate the governor spent some time coming down to Grant County. The wolves have expanded into Grant County as well, and she had promised to visit in greater detail with the Catron County commissioners about this issue. They brought before her today an emergency declaration that had been declared by their county commission because things are that bad in Catron County. Not only has Catron County adopted that, but at this point there are 14 other counties, surrounding counties and growing, that have also declared, passed some sort of resolution in support of that declaration, acknowledging the detriment that Catron County is experiencing.
So in April of this year, Catron County actually started that whole emergency declaration. They've reported wolves are killing livestock, harassing pets, and I didn't know this was even possible. They're stalking children.
They are. In fact, it's Catron County that actually developed and built wolf-proof bus stops. So when children are waiting for the school bus, they are now in wolf-proof cages to make sure that those wolves don't stalk and honestly kill any of the children waiting there on those rural bus routes.
I don't have experience with wolves, but I live in Corrales, so we have lots of coyotes. And coyotes are getting pretty friendly, or at least they give you that impression. So I can only imagine a predator like a wolf. And again, I think wolves are beautiful. You probably feel the same way. But when they start infringing on the public safety and going to the grocery store, I didn't write this down on our little list, but going to the grocery store and buying a steak is pretty expensive.
It is.
So I can't imagine what that costs a farmer or a rancher to lose an animal like that. It's pretty expensive.
It does to consumers. You also have to remember, let's take, for example, you said a coyote. Well, these wolves are about 3, 4, sometimes 5 size bigger. And the reason why we're having so many problems is because of the way they're managed. They are domesticated. And I say that because often these wolves are cage raised. Once they're released, they are vaccinated. And so these aren't necessarily wild. Certainly a wild wolves would be susceptible to any sort of disease, right? Sure. They're vaccinated, they're collared, and it comes at a cost of about $1 million per year per wolf because, you know, we fly helicopters to give flight reports of where they're located. Sometimes when they are near large areas of livestock, to try to mitigate and limit livestock losses, they go out and feed them horse logs. And so over time, these wolves become habituated and quite familiar with human presence. And that's where the problem lies, right? Because then they end up on someone's doorstep. And that happened to me. I'll tell you, I am very familiar with wolves. We had a female wolf that bed down in the backyard there at our ranch in Beaverhead in the girls' playhouse. In the playhouse during a snowstorm. And so the print on those wolves is just massive as they circle the house and want to come in, and they are certainly not scared of humans because, you know, they're habituated at this point.
Yeah, again, I think that, you know, just the beauty of the animals, and it would be nice to have a way to do it. What are you hearing from people in your district? They're obviously living in rural areas. How do they want this addressed?
You know, the best way to handle this right now, and it looks like we're on a path to do that, is under this new federal administration. And Representative Gozar of Arizona just had a big week introducing a bill that would delist this Mexican gray wolf as included on that list. And we expect that bill may get some traction. And so by the end of the year...
So delisting it as an endangered species?
Off of the endangered species. And remember, it's the endangered species status that determines the management, the federal management of these wolves. If it's no longer an endangered species, who becomes the manager? That was our discussion today with the governor. It's my opinion then that perhaps the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish and this wolf program falls on the lap of the state, and unfortunately our local leadership. And what happens then when we have a wolf the day after delisting, let's say, and there's a wolf that's reported on the grounds of Reserve High School? Who's reporting? Who's removing? And do we lethally remove it? And what happens? There's a lot of big unknowns, and I think we are preparing the governor to have to inherit this failed federal program.
But declaring an emergency is also maybe going to bring in some federal help and a consortium of states, like you've already mentioned, Arizona being part of this. So would that be something that you feel like will benefit these farmers and ranchers in these areas?
I think that certainly all these declarations and support that we've seen from neighboring counties has gotten the attention, not just at a state level, but in D.C. I think that in D.C. that this is going to get some traction, and we can see perhaps a delisting, at least a delinking from Mexico. Because remember, in order for us to have a viable population, it's contingent upon Mexico managing their wolves, and that's just frankly not happening. So to delink it from Mexico, to delist it is huge. It then becomes completely off the federal government's radar. It becomes really a state-managed wildlife. And I think at that point, the reality is we can say this, is that there are no winners in this introduction of this endangered species. You have farmers and ranchers who have lost significantly financial loss to them. And the wolf isn't a winner either, because there's no way that this is a viable population that we can actually have a successful reintroduction of this species. Not in today's day and age. It is too populated of an area. And so the sad reality is the wolf never stood a chance either.
As you've been describing this, and I'm thinking through it, there's a question I should have asked earlier, and that is, you mentioned that, first of all, it's difficult for someone in the process of being reimbursed for an animal being killed. First, you have to find it, then you have to prove that a wolf made the kill. How many people are falsely accused of killing wolves? Is that common?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a wolf that was lethally removed off the front porch. This wolf that we talked about that had been bedding down and had been circling the house, and there was completely plenty of evidence, and in fact it was Fish and Wildlife that was on the porch as the wolf was coming back in which there was a lethal removal. About 3 weeks later, I had a sighting as I was traveling from Beaverhead into Winston. I had a sick child on the side of the road, and she was crying. And as I put her back in her car seat and got in my car, there was a large uncollared wolf that was circling my car, taking great interest in the back seat every time my young child cried. And I had made that report, and actually that particular report was classified as an uncredible source. It was an uncollared wolf, right? They're saying, well, that interaction probably never happened. Unfortunately for them, I had cell phone videos and very good photos that quickly kind of pushed back on that. But yeah, I think that depending on where individuals, personal alliances were on the introduction of the Mexican gray wolf may have influenced what direction they leaned.
What does the emergency declaration now from Catron County say about the relationship between rural communities in little old New Mexico and the federal government?
You know, they're asking for support. So they've made themselves declared the state of emergency. They do a very good job of going over the data and the research, how this is really a failed program, the impacts it's having on their county. They've brought those declarations to the governor, hoping that she can come in and support it. And while there isn't a lot of financial support that the state can do at this point, she is going to look into perhaps increasing the number of positions, we call them range riders, that can go out there and kind of help deter some of these interactions between our wolf population and livestock.
How do you see this whole debate unfolding? You've kind of started it today, even this morning, in being invited to the governor's office, and you're always gracious about how those interactions go, but there weren't a lot of solutions proposed, were there?
There isn't, but this has been a really big week when it comes to the Mexican gray wolf program. There has never been a more probable time of this species being delisted than what's happening at the federal government. I am optimistic that by the end of the year, New Mexico will not have an endangered, this wolf will not be protected under the Endangered Species Act. That may lead to more, questions as to what we do then, and so that's why I'm trying to get the state prepared for this program to really land on our lap. But it's a big win for New Mexico cattle ranchers because, with any other predators, we can handle it ourselves. If you have a mountain lion, if you have a coyote who comes, we can take lethal action ourselves. You can't do that with an endangered species. And so that's really what has prevented ranchers from taking action themselves and for lethal removal. Now, once that delisting is made, that's not going to be the case. We have the right to protect our private property, including livestock.
What are the top 2 actions you'd like to see taken immediately in Catron County?
I think that right now Catron County needs to really lean into what's happening at a federal level to encourage President Trump, to encourage our congressmen up there to delist this wolf. That's the biggest step for New Mexico. It's a failed federal program.
Is there some compromise, though? Is there a way to preserve the Mexican gray wolf and have people exist, not necessarily in the same space? You've already said that's not working, but is there any kind of compromise that would work?
Well, 90% of the original habitat is in Mexico, so I do suggest that perhaps we send them back across the border and see how they do there.
I see. And they're kind of smart. In fact, I spoke to a gentleman earlier that said that because these wolves are somewhat domesticated, when they see helicopters, they actually are cognizant and they hide themselves in the brush, and they've trained their pups to do the same. So this is not an animal. I mean, this is a pretty smart, intelligent animal. It
is a pretty smart animal, and when we talk about some of the depredations, we also have to remember that wolves are sport killers. And so some of the horrific scenes that I've seen is actually mama cows that are laid out where the wolves had actually run them down and just ate their udders out, their milk-filled udders. And so they're not killing always just to eat. These are sport killers as well.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the difference between most predators and what you'll find in a gray wolf on the landscape.
Wow, that is really amazing. How do you want New Mexico voices represented in the federal debate? Are you going to have an opportunity to maybe speak yourself or residents of your district?
I think Catron County and really surrounding counties are doing a really good job of making our point, and that is, one, we need this wolf to be delisted. It is a hybrid population. It should have never qualified on the endangered species to begin with, and it's clear that this is a failed program. It's costing taxpayers dollars, millions and millions of dollars for a program that'll never be successful. We want it delisted. We want it delinked, obviously, from what's happening down in Mexico. They'll never establish a viable population there as well. And then it needs to be turned over to really the state and our local governments to manage the remaining wolves on the landscape. But people need to have a right to protect themselves and their private property. And unfortunately, this program is a failure, and we knew that at the introduction in 1998.
Senator Brantley, I appreciate your concise answers. You've obviously thought through this. You've spoken to a lot of people in your district. I appreciate you being up in Santa Fe in this off season and taking the time to meet with us.
Thank you
very
so much for your interest. Take care.